Welcome to another episode of Motivated Masculine Men, where we have the tough conversations men normally have. Today, we have, I'm going to call him a friend again, just like we had Matt Thomas on a little while ago. They're both from Pinal County. But today we're going to talk about, men are caught in an identity tug of war currently. Be tough, but not too tough. Be sensitive, but not too soft. No wonder, we all feel so lost all the time. But I want to introduce Randy. I always pronounce your name wrong, Randy. Randy Snyder, I believe. I get that right? Cool, perfect. Randy and I touched base a few years back and connected quite deeply, quite quickly. He's been a guest on Fight the Burnout, which obviously we have rebranded that podcast into the Motivated Masculine Men. And we talked deep around sex trafficking and law enforcement. We talked deep around the impacts that had on Randy, his family. So if you want to find that episode, it is, scroll back. I'll put a link. I'll put a direct, tell you the episode and the link in the description down below. But today we're going to talk about masculinity. We're also going to talk about where we're both at in life. Randy and I haven't caught up since I was in the U.S. doing a lot of law enforcement directed things. And so he doesn't know what happened since then. And so, as always, we just hit record and have a conversation. So, Randy, tell me about what's going on with you at the moment. I mean, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's, navigating being a dad of two teenage girls is
I don't envy you. I don't envy you.
It's a daily, my world is completely upside down. My son moved out. He's got his own apartment. He's doing good. He's learning how to adult. He's working on figuring that out, which is not an easy thing today. I mean, with the economy and society and everything else, this generation has really had to rebrand what it is to be an adult. And I think a lot of kids nowadays are kind of struggling with trying to figure out what that looks like. Meantime, my daughter is a senior. My older daughter is a senior in high school. So she's right on the cusp of moving out, adulting, getting ready to go to college and all the chaos that goes with that. And then my younger daughter's a freshman. So that brings with it a whole new set of chaos, trying to for her to adjust into the high school life and getting older. And she's getting ready to drive. And she's like right there ready to drive, but can't yet because she's not legal. So yeah. It's an adventure all the time.
Yeah, and I bet there also, if we go on to the topic of the podcast, I bet the two of them are also having to navigate young men these days as well. What that looks like. I know yourself being police, as we talked about before we started recording, semi-active.
I'm more active than I want to be, but not active in the same ways that I was in the past. So
yeah. Tell me a little bit about how are you, navigating that in general, just for yourself. Like, I know for me, I've stepped completely away from law enforcement, completely. Because it was just even though I was, had left police, I was obviously very much involved with mental health and law enforcement and in policing. And me as a man, it was throwing me around a lot emotionally, which is why I've stepped completely away from it. That when I was there, when I saw you there in Phoenix, I was, really doing a whole lot of, mental wellness trainings for departments. And I just found it was just throwing me around emotionally way too much. It was too much of a yo-yo roller coaster, and at that stage in life, and even still, I was like, I need more calm, not chaos in my life. And so I completely stepped away from it. I work in hotels now as part of the sales teams and run this podcast. Got to have a little bit of chaos in my life of some sort. But how do you navigate that with not going full force into the law enforcement side of things? I believe, are you still doing background stuff for the sheriff's office? So not being on duty, but then still being in and involved. How do you manage that as a man in today's world? And I know it's different for the women out there, but how are you navigating it right now as a man?
It's it's difficult because I think law enforcement is one of those things that for a lot of us that get into it, it's not a job, it's a calling. It's God put me on this earth to be a cop. I fully believe that. And more so, he put me in the role of child protection. And so to have to step back from that for my own mental wellness, for my family, for everything that was going on at the time when I retired, it's still really hard not to dive back into that. And so working at the sheriff's office still doing the background investigations. It's kind of like sitting on the edge of the pool. I'm kind of dangling my feet in, kind of feels good, but every once in a while, man, I want to dive right in. And I just know that I can't. We have a lot of problems right now with staffing shortages. And so I've been filling in dispatch like 20 hours a week, going up there and taking calls and, putting them out, dispatching them out, stuff like that. And that's another one of those I'm kind of dabbling my toes in, because I'm hearing the calls. I'm wanting to respond to the calls, but at the same time, I'm on the backside of it. And so it's been a weird dynamic to try to kind of sit on that edge and not go into it. And really what I've been trying to do is transition to more of a support role, doing the backgrounds, doing that kind of stuff, but going hands off with everything else as far as, the calls and the running to the calls and wearing the uniform and all of that stuff, and transitioning more toward some of my writing. And I've been doing a lot of that and having fun with that. So it's just a matter of switching those gears and finding what that next step is going to be. And that's hard for a lot of us.
Was there a turning point where you were like, I need to step out of the more kind of fingers in the pie side of things and be more that support?
Yeah. One of the things when I came back to the sheriff's office, I still wanted to do something to protect kids. I still felt that drive. I still felt that need to do that. And so the sergeant over our internet crimes unit had asked me to come up and kind of help mentor the new guys and show him what to do, show the agency how to best do it. And it only took that one time of going up there and saying, okay, here's how to read a cyber tip. Here's how to work a cyber tip. Here's what they need to be doing for their luring ops. Here's this stuff. And it re-triggered a lot of the PTS that caused me to leave in the first place. And I recognized real fast that if I go back to that and I get back into that aspect, I'm going to go right back down that same rabbit hole I went down before that drug me down and drug my family down and really was not emotionally good for me. And so I had to step back real quick and just go, you know what? You guys have fun, do your thing, go to trainings, do that kind of stuff. I'm just going to stay down here and hire new guys and see how we can do with that.
Yeah. No, how, this is going to be a deep question for you, but I want to ask it, especially on the topic. And you know me, Randy, I don't beat around bushes, do I? How has that situation shaped your identity, your idea of masculinity? Like, obviously going through all the child protection stuff, going through all the child crime, all the crime stuff. And when we say this, for you audience that are listening and watching that aren't aware with the law enforcement side of things, Randy used to do all the child sex offending side of things, investigate all of that. So his face and his nose was consistently in this nastiness and this area of the world. I don't know how you did it for so long, because yeah, it just is a horrible section of the world, which honestly, I don't think gets enough public focus to bring awareness to it. I know that there is a lot more in the last few years, but it seems like anytime that something gets brought up, everybody of power tries to shut it down, which is really, really strange and creepy to me, which we can talk about another day. I know I don't want to drag you back into that world. So yeah. So how do you feel it shaped your idea of masculinity?
So I guess what I would have to say on that one is I had a distorted view of masculinity when I was working the cases, when I was on the job. And even before I left, I had to kind of review what that meant. So now 25 years in law enforcement, I started in law enforcement in 2000 when it was still very hands-on, not a lot of the, kind of touchy-feely side of it. We didn't talk about our emotions. It was very much the old school kind of man up, do your job. The calls are going to suck. And when you're done with it, don't talk about it. Just push it down, bury it down, and get to the next call. And unfortunately, the guys that I worked with, especially a lot of the salty old timers that, came up in the 80s and 90s, when it was even more old school, pushed that mentality. And so the entire time that I was doing child crimes, it was having this impact on me. And it caused a bit of an identity crisis, because there was this part of me that was saying, I need to talk about this. I need to get this shit off my chest. I need to, I'm sorry, I don't always use the right language. Excuse my French there, Chris.
Don't worry about don't worry about it. We swear here, especially when you get two cops together.
Okay.
Don't worry about it. I'll click the illicit button as we.
But it was one of those things where I there was a part of me that needed to get this off my chest. I needed to vent all of this. I needed to get it all out of the way. I needed to deal with it. And my vision, or my understanding of masculinity, is you don't do that. Like, to talk about it is a weakness. To seek mental health assistance is a weakness. It's you risk getting pulled off the job. You risk the boss deciding to take your gun and badge because he thinks that you're crazy. All of those things. And so I turned to the stereotypical wrong way to deal with things. It repressed everything, shoved it way down. I tried to drown my demons in liquor, and they learned how to surf. So really, once I got over that incorrect way of looking at masculinity, and looking at what I was as a man and as a person and as a cop, and I had to redefine that into, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to seek help. It's okay to go talk about it, because we can't be strong for our families if we're broken ourselves. And that was a hard pill to swallow. It was a very bitter pill to swallow, because that's not how I was raised. It's not how I was taught. But I recognize now, and by the grace of God and my wife smacking me upside the head enough times.
They're great, aren't they?
Oh man, she's an angel. I don't know how or why she put up with me, but she did. And she's the one that really kind of said, look, if you still want to be, in our lives as a man and as a husband and as a father, you've got to change what you're defining as manly, and recognize that you are allowed to have emotion. You are allowed to talk about things. You should work on your own mental wellness as well, because again, I can't be there for my family. I can't be there for my kids if I'm broken inside. And once that kind of change clicked in my brain, it was a lot easier to do the things that I needed to do to take care of myself, so that I could then be there to help take care of my family better. And I think that's the conversation that a lot of men need to have nowadays, is understanding that you can kind of live in both worlds. You can have that, masculine, stoic, manly, I carry the weight of the world on my shoulders, and still deal with that stress in the right ways, and be able to mitigate the negative impacts of that. And I think guys need to find that dichotomy, find that happy balance. And unfortunately, society, a lot of what they've said is, masculinity is toxic. You need to not be that manly man. You need to not do all of that. And they're trying to swing that so far to the other side, that guys today are like, I don't know what to do. Do I be a guy, or do I not? And it's tough.
Yeah, it's that whole thing of, do I lean into my genetics, because let's be real here, genetics of a man, goes back 2 million years ago. It's still in there, programmed in there. You ain't gonna get rid of it. Is to protect, is to be that manly man, is to do stupid shit when you're a kid, is to pound your chest occasionally and be like, nah, I am the alpha, and then realize quickly that you're not, and the guy that's a little bit more senior than you is gonna smack you around and put you in your place. We need to have that side of things, but we all have a masculine and feminine side to us. And so we need to also be able to lean into that sensitive side of us, to be able to hold our partner, to be able to, hold our fellow man as well, and be like, hey, like, what's going on? I've got a buddy of mine who I just found out is going through some stuff as well. And it's like, the quote unquote toxic man, I guess you could call it. I don't like to use that term necessarily, but the full on just raw man would just be like just kind of ignore it, dismiss it, and carry on with the jokes and the laughing, instead of leaning into, dude, how can I support you right now? Like, how can I be there for you? How can I hold this space for you?
I think that's the conversation that really needs to get out there more, is you can be that masculine man and still be supportive of your fellow man. And I think that's where it got lost in translation for a while, that, it was the suck it up mentality, the put one foot in front of the other and keep pushing on, instead of the, okay, bro, you're hurting. What can I do to help you as a man? And we got to get back to being able to have both sides of it.
Yeah, it's having these conversations is what it really is. It's being able to have those conversations, and I'd love your thoughts. It just popped into my head, and I run on things that pop into my head. What's your thoughts on? Obviously, we've got these freaking phones and all that kinds of stuff that has connected us. It's made it so that you and I have connected, and it's great. We can connect with people all around the world. I have quote unquote friends all around the world just because of being able to connect through social media and meet people that I've still never met in person, but we bond at the next level. But at the same time, what's your thoughts on the fact that it's disconnected us from having those conversations as men we used to have around a whiskey, or around a fire, or out hunting, or out in the bush doing something? Do you feel that social media, I know you have a huge thing in that social media, internet cyber crime side of things. What's your thoughts on, obviously, maybe leaning into that background, but also just in general nowadays, especially with a son that's just, moved out of house. What's your thoughts on the fact of, how has it connected us more, or has it connected us less? Has it caused a lot of this dichotomy around masculinity and not having these conversations? What's your thoughts on that, Randall?
I think it's ironic how antisocial the social media has made everybody. Because if you look at it, and I see it a lot with our new recruits, right? We're getting a lot of recruits coming in on both the detention side and the sworn side that are, 18, 19, 20 years old. And so they're in that prime. They grew up with social media. They don't know life before Facebook or Instagram or, Snapchat, all of that. And it's really amazing how they can have hundreds or even thousands of friends online and be able to sit 16 hours a day doing this in front of a screen, and yet to have a conversation, to have a face-to-face, eye-to-eye conversation. They're incapable. They do not know how to talk. They don't know how to socialize. You put them in a group, in a public place, in a mall, or in a something like that, they're clueless. They have no idea what to do or what to say. And so I think that while social media is great, like you said, it's allowed me to connect with friends and colleagues all around the world. I've met people from cases or from social media or whatever, and been able to build those bonds and build those relationships seamlessly. But at the same time, I think it has disconnected us from that physical interaction that really is necessary as people. And so, and I'm sure I said this on the last podcast. If I knew where the plug was for the internet, I'd unplug it right now. I would go back to Encyclopedia Britannica on a bookshelf, and the paper yellow pages in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Because it allowed people to be people. It allowed people to have those conversations. And we see it in the political realm. We see it in the social realm. We see it in the law enforcement realm. Everybody is so quick to judge and incapable of having a rational conversation. But man, the keyboard warriors are out there just flaming everything. And then you wonder why we're having protests, why we're having riots, why we're having all of these huge social issues that weren't that big a deal 50, 60 years ago, because people could have that conversation and people knew how to communicate to a degree. I like to say that, it comes back to when we were kids in school, before all the social media and everything. If you had a bully, you learned how to either stand up and pop them in the nose, or, move away. And now, those bullies have a 24-hour access.
Protection and protection, There's things that I know people will. I mean, I used to have the trolls, man, when I used to do all the police stuff on social media. It was insane. Like, I get people threatening me via messages like, dude, cool. When do you want to meet up? Let's go.
Right. Yeah. And before social media, learn to not say those things if you didn't want to get punched.
Yeah,
now
exactly.
You can say it without it. And so I think that we've really lost a lot of that ability to communicate well as individuals, as cultures, as, groups that have differing ideas. And I think that's why we have a lot of the problems that we do now with, in society. And men need to have that. I've seen some recent studies because you brought up, having those conversations over a fire or out on a hunt or something like that. Japan is now using what they call, I think it's forest therapy, where part of their therapeutic practice for people in general, but especially specifically for guys, is having them go out and walk in the forest. And there's a lot of studies now that are talking about how reconnecting with nature is healthy and therapeutic and good for you physically, mentally, emotionally, and everything. And man, there's nothing like going and sitting around a bonfire or a campfire or something like that and having those conversations out in the middle of nowhere, no cellular connection, no anything. And I really think people need to get back to that. And it's a shame that there's a lot of people that never get that because they live in a big city all their life and they never see trees. They never go to a forest. They never have that campfire experience that is so integral to us as humans, genetically and throughout the history of mankind.
As you know, and for those that are listening that don't know, I mean, when I left law enforcement because I burned out, I was, steps off suicidal. It almost became a police statistic of divorce and that. Luckily, again, my wife, like yours, Randall, very tough, stubborn in a good way, and slapped me upside the head. Not literally, but it got me to get that help. And I actually came back to the U.S. and did 2.5 months on a motorcycle out in the wilderness. Camping, and I had I call it 8,000 miles, me and my motorcycle and a one man pump tent. It was literally, that's what I did. And I forced myself to interact and talk to people again because I became that man who did not talk to people. I was very insular. I did not have these conversations at all. And it's why I'm so passionate about it. And I always have been. There's a study that I had pulled up. I just scrolled back and found it. Pew Research in 2023 found that 63% of men under 30 say society doesn't value masculinity anymore.
I would think that number is actually really a lot higher, especially within the last few years with that push toward calling everything toxic masculinity and attacking the cis male and the telling people don't mansplain things to me. And it really, society took a pretty left about masculinity and wanting to erase it. And it's ironic that they did that because now they're in the process of trying to erase femininity. And a lot of the masculine men that would have stood up to this, and I'm looking specifically at the whole transgender men and women's sports conversation that seems to keep popping up every time I open a news app, because 30 years ago you'd have had a bunch of strong masculine men standing up going, there's no way you're letting a guy
30 years ago, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You had men standing up against it, and it's so, I mean, I'm all for, I'm not against, if that's the transgender side. I mean, I know people that, cool, I get it. As a teenager, I don't think you necessarily know your hormones are going all crazy, but if honestly, I have people and friends that I know that have, transitioned and all, and I'm not against it. What I'm against is you forcing that into, especially sports and that, you don't see women going into guys' sports. Let's just put it that way. Guys go into women's sports, or transgender go into women's sports. I think the same thing about steroids. I'm like, cool, if you got a whole group of men and women that want to do steroids and go into sports, create a steroid sport. Create an open sport so they can create a transgender sport. There isn't the fairness there around it. Plus, also, you have that. I mean, again, if we bring our law enforcement brain and hat and that antitrust of anything kind of hat into it, you're always going to have men that then I use it to go in and be that offending person, be that person that's against, that uses it in a bad way. And again, it ruins it for everybody. I mean, you and I know we've all kind of talked about this in the past, and that just like policing. There's one bad seed, it ruins it for everybody. But you are right. We would have in the past, with the breakdown of masculinity and the breakdown of, it's not even masculinity, thinking about it. What are your thoughts on the fact of, is it masculinity or is it just the breakdown of people actually sticking to their values. Men happen to show it a lot more because we're direct. It's a masculine trait to be direct. It's a
Right.
feminine trait to be creative and use lots of words. And men are
And that
very
and
direct, and that's where the mansplaining comes in because it's like, well, just do this. And my wife hates it as well, but we have gotten to a very good place. We've done a lot of learning and a lot of growing on the masculine versus feminine because she grew up in a corporate New Zealand. She's an event manager. She became an event manager in her late teens, early 20s because she was in a group in a company that taught builders. And they went, oh, we need somebody to organize the events that we're doing. You're a woman, you can do it. She literally got told that. And this is back, early 2000s, which in a way is actually true. You look around and event managers, 99% of them are women because of that creative aspect of it. But again, that's a man direct thing. I highly doubt they meant it in a arrogant or a condescending way of any sort. It was just a fact. And that's guys. That's mansplaining. It's guys. Just do it. My wife hates it when I say, just recently she quit her job. And for months I've been like, just quit your job. We'll figure it out. She absolutely hated it until a friend of hers kind of got her to think a little bit different. And then she quit her job and she's like, yeah, I can see it now.
and it's just the difference in our brains. But going back to your point of whether that's a masculine thing or sticking to your values, I think that the decrease in faith has had a significant impact on masculinity and on society in general, and the way that people view a lot of different things. And at the risk of going off on a religious tangent or anything like that, I really think that one of the defining factors in being a good man, and whether you want to call that a masculine man or whatever, is that element of faith. And I'm not gonna point to one faith or the other, but I think that every person inherently needs to have faith in a deity, by whichever one you.
Randall, I'm going to jump out there, so I'm going to interrupt for a second on the faith side of things because I'm not a religious. When I say religious, I'm not a Christian. I'm not a I'm not religious in a quote unquote God, Bible, Buddhism, whatever kind of religion. I believe there's a greater power out there, but agree with you like. And for any listener out there that's like, oh, when you hear the word religion, I don't know, for me, that it can have bad connotation. When we say religion, I want to clarify that and hear your thoughts on it. When you say religion, I know that you are a religious guy in that, believe in God, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. For me, I believe there is a greater power out there. I believe in the universe. I believe that there is something greater out there that looks after us. I believe there are spirits out there. I believe that, there is something that is greater than us out there. And full on with you, if you do not believe in something greater than you, you will get lost.
Right. And that's why I'm saying, I come from a background that didn't push religious faith in any particular. I used to joke that I'm a non-practicing agnostic because, I knew that there was a God. I didn't know his name. I didn't know what to, I didn't follow any particular dogmatic practices or anything else. But you have to have that inherent belief in something bigger than you to be able to navigate, I think, throughout life. And if you don't, that's a form of severe narcissism that really doesn't bode well in the bigger in the bigger world. I happen to have faith, and it was part of my journey in law enforcement, in child crimes, in my PTS, that led me to have more faith and to rediscover faith in a very Christian form. And I think that has been very, very beneficial for me and for my family. And it's helped to hold my family together through some hard times because we have that faith that God is there for us. He's going to take care of us. And, through God, we can do anything together. By whatever name you want to call him, if you don't have that faith in something bigger than yourself, then in the fact that there is more to life than just what you are experiencing as a person, it'll crush you. And when I lost my faith for a period of time, man, that's when I hit my lowest low. And I think that we're seeing that in society too. And it's uplifting to start seeing us coming out of that as a society, very dark place. And we're seeing more people going back to faith, whatever faith they choose, and finding that something bigger than them to be able to carry them through the dark times. And
even if it's just focusing on having faith that shit's going to go right. that you
Yep.
can get through it. That's faith right in there. It's
And
so true. You and I can relate on the whole, like, having to believe in something bigger, because if you don't, and you just believe in yourself and your own self, one, it's narcissistic, but two, it's you'll get lost. And men, especially when they lose, I mean, I know we could have a whole nother conversation around father figures and the importance of that in young men. And in fact, actually, I'd love to talk to you about it, because obviously you've just had your son leave home, and how that is so important, because when you have that thing that you look up to, whether it's faith, whether it's father, whether it's a father figure, it impacts you and it gives you something to think about and to relate to, so that you actually keep growing, so you actually keep evolving to become the best version of yourself.
right. And I think another thing, and you brought it up, and about your burnout and how that took you down a dark path and brought you to almost to the point of committing suicide. I was in a similar boat. There were times where the idea of nibbling the end of my barrel was not outside a possibility. And by the grace of God, I never did. But unfortunately, I have a cousin that grew up with a very different background than me, had a very different concept of faith, had a very different concept of the world. And unfortunately, he did take his own life. And it's hard to know exactly what the breaking point was for him to push him over that edge. But knowing what I do about his background and his upbringing and things like that, I have to suspect that at least some of that was the lack of any kind of faith in a greater power, in a deity, in a higher being that can help you recognize that whatever funk you're in, whatever hole you're in, there's a way to get out of it. And he didn't see a way out of it. And so, I think that for true masculinity, there has to be that connection to something bigger, again, by whatever name you want to call him, or whatever, where it gets.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, and then it's also, it comes down into those values as well. Having that faith and having good values and sticking to them is so important. What do you think the role of culture versus personal responsibility plays in this masculine world that we're currently in?
I think a lot of people have gotten rid of the idea of personal responsibility. You see a lot of, and I don't know if that's a social media thing, or I don't know where that comes from, but I was raised, and when I was growing up, it was, you take responsibility. You screw up, that's on you. You don't blame somebody else for your screw up. You own it. You learn from it. You deal with it. You move on. If I do something wrong, I have to be prepared to own that. And you see a lot of people nowadays. I mean, I don't know if you watch any of the body cam videos or anything. I get hilarious. I actually subscribe to a couple of feeds of the crazy Karens and the body cam feeds and stuff. And it's amazing how many people, when they get pulled over, can't take responsibility for their own actions, and they want to blame the cop, or they want to blame it's because I'm this color, or it's because I'm this gender, or it's because I'm this faith, or it's because I'm this. No, man, it's because you had your foot down on that skinny pedal on the right a little heavy, and you were speeding.
I love this. I've got to jump in on that. I love when people use the race card. So many times, like, I've had the race card pulled on me here, and people are like, "Oh, it's because I'm black," and I'm like, "First off, you're not black, you're brown, because you're Maori. You go to America, there's black there." But then I'm like, "Dude, it's not like I turned around and started coming after you. I was driving behind you. I can't even see your race. Your headrest is in the way. I can't see what you look like. I can't see the color of your skin. All I know is that you were speeding, you were driving like an idiot, or your car has something that has caused me to pull you over."
Right. But that sense of perpetual victimhood has permeated so much of society, and so many people in society, that nobody knows how to take personal responsibility anymore. And you see these explosions of emotion from people over the tiniest little things, and in such public settings, that and 99% of it comes down to, if you would just be responsible for yourself and for what you do, and take responsibility for your own actions, you'd probably have a little bit happier life, because you wouldn't constantly feel like a victim for everything. So I think that there's a lot of change that needs to come about when we talk about men and masculinity. Of I think that's an inherent part of it, taking responsibility for yourself, owning your actions, good, bad, and otherwise, and being prepared to defend your actions when they're right and change them when they're wrong. And here's a good thing. Like you said, guys, we're straightforward. We're a bull in the china shop a lot of times. I know that my natural reaction to a lot of things is to be very direct and confrontational, and because I want to solve it and move on. I don't want this to linger. I don't want this to keep dragging. I want to sit down, let's resolve it, let's fix it, let's move on, because I got other things to do. And I've recently had to have my wife reinforce the need for patience, especially with teenagers, because
teenage females.
Because that direct way of dealing with things doesn't work with them. And it was a daily reminder that just take a deep breath, step back, and patience will work. And it did finally. And it was the greatest blessing I've had in a long time for her insistence that I just be patient and step back and not be that guy.
Not completely lean into that right-hand side of masculinity.
Right. And so again, I think that's something that as men, we have to learn that, our way isn't always the right way. And we do sometimes have to be willing to adapt and to change, and to, just like with, having conversations like this of what is masculine. We don't have to bury all of our feelings. We can talk about it. We don't have to shut down and think that we're the only ones dealing with something or coping with something. We can have those conversations. We can build that up, and we can lean on one another in ways that we historically haven't, and still be masculine, still be men, just be better versions of ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. What happens if we don't figure this out, you reckon, Randall?
Man, every day I see society going in this spiral downward. And I don't know if it's just because of the way the American media portrays it. I don't know if this is actually the reality. I mean, I know that the American media to some degree incites a lot of this and is good about only showing certain sides of us things, or enhancing our views of certain things. So I don't know if it's really as bad as the media makes it out to be. And I don't know if maybe it's just a cultural thing here, if it's the same in every other country, but it sure seems like we're on a downward spiral. And if we don't make some pretty significant changes here pretty soon, we're going to start having a whole lot of problems that's going to take us a long time to dig our way out of. And I hate to look at the fall of the Roman Empire as a way to look at it, but it sure kind of mirrors that on some levels.
Yeah. It is a downfall, because without strong men, we can't actually. I mean, let's go extreme. You don't have protection. You don't have law enforcement. Because let's get real. Law enforcement is a very masculine role. Military, very masculine role. Look at most of the females that are in law enforcement and in the military. They are very masculine females. Guys are as well. It can also breed that not so great man, because there's that lot of pounding of the chest. Alpha. I have to be the best.
Right.
But at the same
time, ego gets in our way a lot.
Oh, ego gets in the way a lot, and then there is that lack of taking responsibility in some part. I do feel like it's again, like you said, media has blown it well out of proportion on things. But then you also just have your day-to-day side of things. Let's take law enforcement, military, protecting out. It's also a breakdown of relationships. Highest divorce rate ever in history. We have men struggling to find relationships. We have women women in their 40s that have never had a decent relationship because there's no decent, quote unquote, decent men out there. So if we don't fix this, it becomes a very massive problem. I mean, we're already seeing the decline of population worldwide because people aren't procreating. Again, that comes into that relationship side. We can't, if you don't have men standing as good men, let's really reiterate that, as good men. And I think, you saying that thing of like taking ownership, I think it's such an important factor, because when you can stand up and say to your partner or say to your friends, guys, I screwed up. Yep, I was wrong on that. Even when you think you are 100% right. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a second. Somebody shows you a different perspective, shows you a different thought on it. And you're like, oh, wait a second. No, I was wrong on that. Sorry, guys. Yep. That I'll take that one. It shows so much strength. And yes, it
Yep.
sucks, especially as a man. I know like when I do it, and I do it quite often, I'm pretty I've grown on that side completely. It's like and my mom trained me, like raised me to be like that. She's like, if you screw up, you screw up. It's okay. We'll work on it. As long as you grow from it, you don't keep, making the same mistake or making the
Yeah.
same mess up. It's fine. Like this is life. You have to make mistakes in order to learn. Randall, what do you think? Let's say, there's a man out there, he's listening, young, older. Where does he start to solve all this for himself? Because you can't change anybody else. You can only work on yourself. Where do
Yeah,
you think he starts?
I think the biggest thing is you have to be willing to really look at yourself in the mirror and be willing to recognize your own faults. We all have them. We don't like to recognize them. It's not fun, but if you're not willing to recognize your own faults and then be willing to find ways to fix them, you're just going to keep going down the same bad path. You're going to keep going down the same, you're going to get stuck in that rut of, unhappiness or discontent or whatever. And so you have to be willing to make those changes. And it sucks. I mean, as cops, we like to say there's only two things that we hate, way things are and change. And guys are
So
a lot
true.
like that. I
We
mean,
are.
I will bitch about the way things are, but damn it, don't change it because I'm used to the way things are. But you have to be able to recognize that. And, to me, I think some of that again comes back to having faith and finding that faith to that there is the ability to change, there is the ability to improve, there is the ability to grow. And then I was blessed with a wife that wants me to change and it has no problem pointing out when I've screwed up, and then I just have to eat that little bit of crow, eat that humble pie, and be willing to make those changes. And so it's a lot of introspection that guys have not always promoted. We've always been more about the external. If I can solve this, if I can fix this, if I can change this, if I can just work harder to make more money to have the better house, or work harder to have the better car or whatever, and not said, okay, I'm going to work harder on who I am. I'm going to work harder on being more expressive with my emotion. I'm going to work harder on complimenting my wife or recognizing her value and recognizing what she does and what she adds.
Or just
I'm going to
asking her
work.
what she needs.
Yeah. And it's funny, we were having that very conversation this morning. I have gotten so used to coming home from work and her just telling me about her day, like right off the bat. I don't have to ask. She just immediately goes into, so this is what happened today, and this is what, Peyton did, and this is what Ashton did, and this is what I had to do, and this is da 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 da. And, 45 minutes later, she takes a breath and I can interject. But I've gotten so used to her doing that automatically that I've been negligent in saying, how was your day, sweetheart? Tell me about your day. What happened to you today? And she was missing that, and she needed that. And that's on me to be that person that doesn't just take for granted she's going to tell me about her day. She needs to be able to have somebody ask that. That's on me to change that. And guys, we got to be willing to change. We got to be willing to adapt. We got to be willing to take that step back and say, you know what, I need help, or she needs help, and I'm going to be that shoulder. I'm going to be that ear, that whatever. Not just be that guy that goes to work and comes home and assumes that everything's going to be okay.
I think it's a big factor there. I don't know about you, Randall, but when somebody tells me I need to change, I kind of sometimes my back will kind of go up. And so I like to tell people, I like to, communicate with people. Everything that Randall is saying, for those that was like, oh, I don't need to change, she needs to change, or he needs to change. It's not changing, it's growing. And it's growing and becoming a better man because you want to be. It's not about getting handed something and being told that you have to do this. It's about choosing and living it. If we don't do this, as we've talked about, Randall, throughout this whole conversation, if we don't adapt, if we don't grow, it's going to be the downside of us. We're going to
and maybe that's the important part of it is the verbiage. You're right, we don't like to change, but we can grow. Yeah. And in growth you get change, but just changing the mindset of I'm not changing, I'm growing, makes it easier to swallow.
Yeah, makes it easier to swallow, and it's growing. Again, if you're in a relationship, it's growing together. There's a reason my wife and I, you and your wife, Randall, have been together a long time as well. There's a reason my wife and I have been through so much stuff, but at the same time have been together for 18 years now. We've been married for, what are we now? 13 years, coming up to 14 years. There's a reason that we are, and we say it all the time. We're the happiest we've ever been because we consistently grow together and work on it together. If you're not in a relationship, this is how you find one. You grow, you adapt, you accept the rejections of that woman out there that reject you that you really liked, and you know, in a way, reflect on it, look at it, what went well, what didn't, how do I grow from this? If there's things that you're like, no, this is core, I really like this about myself, cool. Then obviously that was not right for that person. And that's okay. But it's also reflecting, is this actually is it my ego talking here that I am
Right.
like, no, I have to hold on to this? Or is it that, no, actually, I really enjoy this side of me? Cool, perfect. Not everybody is going to like that, and not everybody should like that.
Right.
You know,
And you can still grow with those differences. I read voraciously. I have 6 books going right now.
good on you.
Simultaneously, I've read. I think I'm on book 50 for the year so far, and we're only in September. I mean, I read constantly. My wife won't read a recipe.
Yeah.
She
I'm not
hates
a
to
reader.
read.
I'm not a reader as
Yeah.
well. I'll listen to audiobooks occasionally, but I'm not a reader. Yeah. It just I
And
get bored. I get bored and frustrated because I'm not a great reader because I don't do it that much.
and for all your viewers, my books are now on audiobook. But that's okay. That difference, that yin and yang is what makes us work, because we're not the same person, and we can grow together and
Mm,
still have our separate, ideas and our separate things that we like and everything else. And that's the other thing, is I think so much of society has gotten into the swipe right, and it's all very physical, it's all very instantaneous, that they've forgotten that you need those deeper levels to sustain the relationship. And if you're always just going for that person because of a physical attraction, or because you think you can swipe right and they have a lot of the same ideas or likes or whatever the case, that may not be the right fit for you. You may need to change your criteria if you're having trouble finding that relationship and you're wanting to find that relationship. Think outside the box. Look at the ones that maybe aren't the 10 physically, but they're a 10 emotionally. They're a 10 in other ways, and they may not like everything that you like. My wife has never seen Star Wars. Why the hell I married her 25 years ago is beyond me, when she has never seen any of the Star Wars. And I'm a huge Star Wars geek. I dress up as a stormtrooper to go to children's charities. I've read every one of the books. I got the movies memorized. I have hundreds of action figures. But you know what? It works. And,
yep.
and you've got to have those differences to make it work. You can't, if all of your likes and dislikes and everything are doing this because they're perfectly lined up, you're never going to get that good traction. You have to have those differences to really make that bond and make it stick. And I think people have forgotten that, and they're so used to instant gratification, swipe right, boom, it's got to go. They're not finding that deeper level.
My wife and I in the early days we were like, how is this going to work? Because we are so polar opposite in the things that we like and do. Now, yes, there are a lot of things that are similar. We both love to
Mm-hmm.
travel. We both love, to take care of ourselves. But then there is like lots of things where we are just complete polar opposites on the things
Yep.
that we like. She likes to go to the mall and go shopping and do things like that. And for a long time, I was like, I cannot think of anything worse to do on my Saturday is to go to the mall and go look at clothes.
Right.
But again, over the years, I've gone, no, this is something that she needs, and I need to be there and support her with that. And then she'll do things with me. Like in the early days when I had a motorcycle, she was like, nah, there's no way you'll ever get me on the back of it. Now we do
Mm-hmm.
motorcycle tours in the US and like take people on journeys and like talk about burnout and have these conversations on those side of things. And she hops on the back. Because
Yep.
again, she was like, and I adapted my motorcycle to take her on the back so that she still feels safe. And she's like, I remember us driving into Monument Valley. So she had been on the back of my kind of crotch rocket-ish type bike, sport kind of naked bike here. So not quite a crotch rocket, but quick like one, and
Mm-hmm.
not comfortable like one. And she had been on the back, and we'd done some lane splitting, and go to the airport, ride around a little bit on it. And then we organized a trip in the U.S. So we were on a Harley on a tour, like the full tour. So she had the lazy boy seat on the back, and that she actually fell asleep the last day of the 7 day trip. And so we're taking these group of like five guys around, and we went over the hill, and you know that like hill going from Phoenix or going from Arizona, and you drop into Monument Valley, and you
Mhm.
kind of you go over and you drop in, and she's looking around, and I remember her. We have intercoms, and I remember her going, "I get it now." And the
Yeah.
moment will stick with me forever. She's like, I get it now. I was like, you get what? She's like, why you love this. But those are the things as we adapt. The core thing that we've realized, and last kind of topic that we talked before I want you to be able to, talk about, your books so that people can find them. Uh, Values. I believe that a relationship, again, the swiping and that you can't see it, you can't find it. But the values that somebody has, if your values, at least a couple of your top three or five, 3 to 5, they don't have to be the same, same alignment or, which one's most important. But as long as you have at least a couple of the top values that you stick by and you live by, your relationship will work and
Right.
you can adapt and you can grow together. What are your thoughts on that, Randall, when it comes to relationship side for men?
Oh, absolutely. And not only just the similar values, I think, because that there's going to be some difference there based upon how you were raised, the family life, things like that. But I think that at the core of it, yeah, you have to have those same general values, those same general ideas, and that's something that really has to be there for the relationship to work. Um, and more importantly, they need to be the core values.
That's what I
You
mean.
know,
Like they're your top values. They're your top 5 values, and at
yeah,
least a few of them are all are the same. They don't have to line up as the same kind of which one's most important to you, but they
right,
have to your core values that you live by. And if you don't know what those values are, start to ask yourself. There's
yeah,
processes and systems and that you can do to really find those. But
and
yes,
make sure they're not just the superficial ones, because I
uh,
think that's the other problem is so much of society now is superficially based because of social media and the internet and everything else, that people don't always know what their core values are. They may know what their superficial values are. I know that I'm looking for a person that looks like this or likes
yeah,
this kind of music,
those
thinks
aren't
that.
valid.
Yeah, but not everybody is introspective enough to
No,
recognize
they're
that,
not.
and because they've gotten so used to this instantaneous gratification, that immediate, I push the button and Amazon delivers it an hour later, or DoorDash delivers it an hour later, or whatever. People don't dig deep anymore.
No.
And they need to be more introspective on what those values are to be able to find that person who meshes well. I hate to say it, my daughter was making a comment about some of the boys in her school, and how they're stupid. And I said, well, yeah, we are. We tend to be until about the age of 25. Some of us longer.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm still stupid
it's
this day and I'm almost 40.
absolutely. 48 years old, I still don't have two brain cells to rub together when it comes to the important stuff. Fortunately, my wife thinks for me, and that's how we adapt. But she was talking about, well, all these boys at school, and I said, well, maybe consider looking outside of that setting.
Yeah, that circle.
You like to read, go to the library, find the guys that have those things in common. You have a very strong faith in God. Look around the church, look at the small groups, look at the youth groups, look at those kinds of things. So many people nowadays, again, are finding their quote unquote soulmate on Tinder, or on an app, or in a bar, or something like that. And if that's the best you got, is they like to drink with me on Friday nights at the bar, that's not a sustainable kind of thing. And people just need to be less instantaneous and more introspective to be able to really find what's going to make them happy, and be prepared to have those differences.
And the
Like you
rejection.
said,
I remember my wife and I. So I mean, we're going back before. I know, like your wife and you. I'm going back before the swiping era. I got invited by a mutual friend of my wife and I's, who's not even really a friend of ours anymore. It was just more of a. It was he and I had fun together. She
mm,
and I. So he invited me to a barbecue. I was killing some time before I had to drive up north back to go do my Yachtmaster Skipper's ticket. And so I was waiting for one of the guys from that. And so I was like, oh, cool, sweet. Yeah, I'll come to the barbecue. He was like, oh, there's going to be some hot girls there. And that I was like 20. So obviously, where my mind was going first and
Right.
foremost. But I got there and met my wife. Her neck hurt. I, rubbed her neck. Have parents that are chiropractors, so I kind of have a little bit of that handy skill, which it works great with women. And then kind of that was that. Didn't get her number or anything. And then I ended up messaging my buddy and was like, "Hey, can I get her number?" And then started messaging her. And it was the persistence. So her flatmate or her, roommate was like, she was like to her roommate, he's too American, too tall, and too young, because I'm younger than her by a couple of years. But I was persistent. I wasn't stalker, but I was persistent, constantly messaging her. She was still messaging me back. She didn't tell me to absolutely F off or anything like that. But I was persistent with it. And I do feel like for guys out there, for those young men out there, if be persistent, be that go-getter, be that, because it does portray of your character, of who you're going to be. And actually, it shows your values as well, because, do that. And women out there, give some guys a chance. You can always tell them no and tell them to piss off. I know that there are creepy guys out there, and, this day and age with social media, best, Randall. This
Yeah.
day and age with the cyber world, there are a
I
lot
met
of
a few of
creepers
them.
out there. So be smart about it, women. And guys, don't be a freaking creeper. But you can be persistent. It's a great value to have, because it shows that you will be persistent in other areas of your life, when it comes to work, when it comes to providing, when it comes to protecting, when it comes to looking after and cherishing that woman out there. Because I know, again, we talked about it early on in today's conversation around that whole, reduction of relationships and people struggling to find those side of things. Randall, I'll let you have a couple words on that, and then I want to kind of jump into how people can, learn more about you. I know you've got a few books out there, how they can find those. We'll put some links in the description in that as well, but I'll give you your thoughts on that, kind of my comment on persistence.
Well, and here's the one thing that I've always tried to push toward, the new deputies when I was a corporal, or, instill in my girls, and here's what you need to look for. Guys, you need to treat that girl like you would want somebody to treat your sister or your mother
Or your daughter.
or your daughter. Although that's a little bit harder one for young guys to wrap their head around.
Sister's a good one.
If my daughter brings a boy home for me to meet, and he stands upright and he looks well dressed, and I get my concept of well dressed and what's popular today are two totally different things, but at least not, he doesn't look like he just rolled around in a trash bin or something. Comes over, good firm handshake, eye contact, nice to meet you, sir, how are you doing? I know that kid's probably going to treat my daughter right. Now, I also like to make sure that they know that my daughter's just as good a shot as I am, and that she likes guns as much as I do.
I bet she can take care of herself.
Right. That tends to help also. But again, it's that showing that genuine respect, because if he's not going to come into my house and respect me, he's not going to respect her. And so, there's been a couple of guys that have come over to the house and haven't been respectful, and not surprisingly, they didn't last long because they didn't treat her right, and she is confident enough in herself to say, you know what, that's not what I want. And she found out fairly early on in her high school career that, sometimes the pretty boy isn't the one that is going to be the good one, and you lower that standard on the attractive scale a little bit, you might find somebody who's a little bit better quality, and that's the more important. So, when it comes to being a good guy and going out and finding that person, be genuine, be honest, and be, treat her the way that you would want somebody to treat your sister. Because if you're just looking at her as a one night stand or a quick whatever, is that how you want somebody to treat your sister? And just consider that. And hopefully that helps some guys change their mindset a little bit, start finding some quality.
Yeah, no, that advice. There's obviously so much more that we could talk about. Randall, it's been a great conversation today. Got a couple final questions for you, but before I jump into that, because I always like to give guests an opportunity, especially when they have books, or they have have an offering that is impactful. I like to give them the opportunity to kind of let the audience know where they can find it, what they're going to learn, and a little bit of time to highlight that side. So, Randall, if you want to, the floor is yours to talk about kind of the books and stuff that you have.
I appreciate that. So I've got a couple of books out there. The main one is called Cyber Creeps. It's on Amazon. It's available in ebook, paperback, and now as an audiobook. And that is just basically my life in law enforcement. The 20 years that I spent working law enforcement, and more specifically the 10 years that I worked child crimes and internet crimes against children, to try and educate people about the dangers that are online so that they can protect their kids, their families, their loved ones, because the numbers are getting worse. Last week, there was over 500,000 cases reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in a 7-day period. There were times during COVID where we were getting over 1 million cases a week. And so it's out there, and people need to protect themselves and be prepared to protect their loved ones. On a lighter note, on a happier note, I have a book called Hellbent Anthology. It was the first one that I published. My great grandpa in 1923 took a road trip in a Model T with 3 of his buddies from Columbus, Ohio to San Francisco. And he kept a journal the whole way, talking about the people they met, the things that they saw. It has some original pictures that he took. And it's just a really fun look at how simple life was in 1923. And they were excited to be able to drive 115 miles in a day. I mean, like 30 miles an hour was like awesome. And so it's just kind of an interesting look back at history. And then as I was writing my book, My Cyber Creeps, my 12-year-old at the time was like, well, Dad, when are you going to write something that I can read? And I said, well, I don't know. Give me an idea. She goes, how about a zombie that falls in love? We can do that. We can play with that. So she and I sat down together. She co-authored it. She did all the artwork for the cover and everything. And we wrote, it's called Lovin Brains. The first book in the series was called Transmission. And it's actually, I printed it, I published it under a slightly different name. So there wasn't that immediate connection. But if you look up Lovin Brains Transmission in Amazon, you'll find it again, paperback, ebook, and an audio version. And it's a kind of late teen, young adult book about a zombie that falls in love and how he tries to fix things. We had so much fun writing it. We wrote a second book that was published, and that was Transmission. So we have Infection first and then Transmission. And then she is currently working on the third book in the series, while I have started a spin-off series from one of the characters we introduced in book 2. And I hope to get that published here probably first of next year. I'm still having too much fun writing it and editing and adding a bunch of stuff, but it's a paranormal history. And so that'll be coming out probably after the first of the year, but definitely appreciate any support and anybody that wants to come check out some cool books and audio versions if you like to listen to them instead.
No, that's awesome, Randall. And yeah, we'll put the links to them down below. If I don't have them in our scheduling of the podcast, I'll reach out and grab them from you, or go hunt them down. That's awesome. And it's so cool that you're doing something with your daughter. You've done something with your daughter, and obviously, it is therapeutic having that thing. And that's so important for men out there, is to have that thing and find that thing that you enjoy. I've got my things, you've got your things. And if you don't know, go back to your childhood and think about the things that you enjoyed doing back then and give them another go. Randall, to wrap up, last question. I always ask this as a final question to finish. And I can repeat it because it is a little, no, it's not long. Anyways, I can repeat it. I'm rambling here. If you could hand every man on the planet a single insight that would unlock his potential to lead, love, and live with purpose, what would you tell him?
I think the probably the most important thing that I've come out of in my relationships, both with my wife and my kids and in law enforcement and just people in general, is be yourself, be genuine. Be honest, in your dealings with people, but at the same time, don't try to change who you are to fit what you think somebody else wants you to be, because it never works out. If you try to be something that you're not, it's going to backfire on you, and somebody's going to find out eventually that you're being false. That dishonesty will kill relationships with people, be they romantic or friendship or professional or whatever. That dishonesty will destroy it every time. And so, be genuine, be yourself, and be honest in your dealings with people, and you'll go a long way. You'll have a lot of good relationships in every aspect of life.
I appreciate that, Randall. Some great wise words there to finish off. Again, I want to thank you for all that you've done, for the journey, for sharing today, for sharing in the past as well. And I know we'll have another conversation. hopefully, if not in person again on here, but hopefully in person we can do something when I'm visiting Phoenix next. I need to get
Next
back
time
there.
I probably won't get on a bike, but I'll follow behind in a car and help y'all change tires and stuff. You know?
That sounds great. I think the next one we might actually even open it up to some classic-ish type cars, and rent classic cars, and that, when I say classic cars, ones that aren't going to break down. But yeah, no, appreciate it, Randall, and thanks for your support as always with everything that I'm doing. And again, I will say this, and I've said it before. If you need anything support-wise, anything at all, you know where I am. You got my number on that side. If this spoke to you out there, everybody, please share it to another brother. Masculinity isn't figured out alone. We got to work on this together, and the best way to do it is put yourself together in a circle, put yourself together in what I call a brotherhood, so that you can learn from others. Just like, I've learned things from Randall today. I've picked things up that challenged my brain, that challenged the way that I think, and it's so important. So please do share this out to a brother, share this out to somebody that it might impact, or that needs it. Just by hinting it out to them, they might find it valuable, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to help those other men, the men out there, to be better, to be stronger, and to live a great life. Till next time, we thank you all very much for listening, watching. Please do like and subscribe if you feel it will help the algorithm, help us get out there to more men. Until next time, stay safe, and we love you all.